Hey guys, today we're going to be creating the Infinity War bubble scene. Today's tutorial will be the actual bubbles coming out of the gun, and in a couple days I'll be releasing the gun actually turning into bubbles. And with that note, let's show you what we made. Alright, so what you can see is we got a couple things going on. We got the bubbles actually coming out, matched with the scene, got reflections. There's a little bit of distortion when they first shoot out. You can also see that there's a little spray of water that comes out as well. First thing you want to do is get your footage, drop it into a new comp, and this is just myself lifting the gun, shooting, and nothing's coming out obviously. First thing what we're going to do is create a new null object. Trim it so it's when he pulls the trigger. You can see myself pulling the trigger here. I'll go a couple frames back. Trim the null. We're going to name this tip tracker. Going to go to the main footage and click track motion. What we're going to do is we're actually going to track the motion of the gun, so when we add the bubbles it follows the motion of the gun from the tip. And my gun doesn't rotate at all, so I don't need rotation, but if your gun tilts down or tilts up, you'll have to add your rotation. We're going to edit the target, change it to tip tracker, and then we're going to track forwards. Alright, and if you look at it, you can see that the point's staying there pretty good, so that's a good track. We're going to apply it. Okay, minimize that for now. Now you can see that the null is attached to the footage. Quick little thing you can do is if you click P, as you can see that if we apply anything, it's going to apply to the origin, and the origin's on the top of the gun and it's not in the middle. What you can do is if you click P, click on position so all the keyframes are highlighted, then you can just move it to the middle there. This sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. For this scene it does work, but there'll be a few times where it just kind of gets out of orientation. Yeah, let's minimize that. What we're going to do is create a new solid. This solid is going to be the bubbles with 3 Bs. And we're going to drop down an effect called foam. What this effect is, it's pretty much just simulates bubbles. We could change it from draft to rendered so we can actually see the final product. For producer, we're going to change the X size to 0, the Y size to 0. I accidentally clicked cap locks. Now the bubbles will spawn from just one point and not just a squared area. Production rate is how many particles are actually being spawned. So if you increase this to like say 3, there'll be more. You lower it to 0.1, there's less obviously. What I'm going to do is find where I pull the trigger right here, and I'm going to change this to 0.24. I find anywhere between 2 to 0.3 or 0.2 to 0.3 is the best, where you don't have too many bubbles, but it's enough. I'm going to add a keyframe for that. Go 1 page forward or back a frame by clicking page up, then change that to 0. So now you can see that they start to spawn. But you can also see that it's a little bit of a delay before the bubbles actually start to come out. So you can move keyframes forward, so actually when he pulls the trigger, bubbles start to come out. This just takes a little bit of adjusting, and then you can get a perfect spot. Alright, for bubbles, what we're going to do is, I like the size to be 0.7 and the size variance 0.2. So that means that the bubbles are pretty much the same size. There's not much of a difference between them. Growth, this is so you can have tiny bubbles at first. If you increase this, the bubbles will spawn at its final size. If you want it to be a little bit smaller when it spawns, you can change that. This doesn't really affect the actual effect, so preference thing. Physics, what we're going to do is, for the initial speed, it's where the direction is. We change this to say 4. the bubbles are going to be shooting up. Change the direction to 90. They'll be shooting the rate how we want it. This is obviously too fast, so I'm going to change it to say 1.8 so that the bubbles are a little bit slower. For the wind, what I'm going to do with the wind is have the wind blow up so the bubbles can curve up. If we change the direction to 0, it's pointing up, and increase the speed to say 8, we can see that the bubbles are blowing up in the direction kind of how we want it. If you increase the speed more, bubbles will go up quicker. Turbulence is how much the bubbles kind of displace over time. So if you change this to 1 or 0 or very low, it'll just kind of stay in the 1 pattern. It's going to bring it down just a little bit. Wobble amount is actually how much the bubbles are wobbling themselves. Repulsion is how close the bubbles stay to each other. So if you lower it, the bubbles will come a bit closer together. If you increase it, they'll get further away from each other. So I like to keep it around 1 or bring it a little bit lower. Pop velocity is not important. The viscosity is how quickly the bubbles float up. So the higher the number is, the quicker they float or rise. So you can see here that the bubbles rise to the spot. Alright. And for the stickiness is the same as the repulsion. It's the higher the number is, the closer they are together, and the further or lower it is, they aren't as close to each other. Control Z. What we can do is we see that the particles are spawning here, but they're not spawning from the tip of the gun. What I'm going to do is if you go to production reducer point, you go to the little stopwatch and you hold Alt and click on it. Brings up the expression. If you go to tip tracker, press P to open up the position. Go back to where the expression is, where it says effect foam 3. With the pickwick, go to the position, click on it. We'll bring up transformation position, and then click elsewhere, and you can see that the bubbles are now spawning from that point like we want. Minimize those two. Rendering. So if you look here where the bubbles are overlapping, transparent says that they're both the same opacity. Solid on top is the bottom one, or the one behind them looks like it's kind of overlapping it. If you go solid new on top, the bubble in front is covering it. I find this one looks the best. Bubble texture, they got a couple defaults here where you can go through and find one if you like, but I like to keep it on the default bubble. The bubble texture layer is, if you have a layer, you can change it. So if you have like an elephant or a giraffe or something, you can change the bubble texture and it'll be spawning giraffes and elephants instead of bubbles. The orientation, this is where like you get the reflections and the lights and all that. I find fix is the best as well for this. For environment map, what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the main footage, recompose it, and call this environment, and move all attributes. Click OK, double click on it. Whatever we do to this footage will affect the reflections in it. Say if we have a fire and we want the reflections to have it, we go back to the main layer, turn that off, go to bubbles, effects, environment map, and change it to environment. You won't see anything yet, but if you go to reflective strength, you increase it. You can see that there's the orange from the fire reflecting. I like to keep this at 1 because bubbles are very reflective, and the reflection converge is how much of the reflections in it. The higher it is, you see more reflection. The lower it is, it's kind of blurred out. So I like to keep this quite high as well because I like seeing those details in it. For the simulation quality, I'm going to change that to intense. I just find it works a little bit better. Obviously there's no fire in the scene, so I'm going to get rid of the fire. Just have the original footage. you have an HDR photo as well, this would work just as well. But for this, it's just okay. And if you don't like how the bubbles are looking, say if there's too many bubbles wherever, you can change the seed to say like 2 or any number you like, and they'll change how the bubbles come out. Right, you can see that there's a lot of bubbles coming out. That's a bit too much for me, so I'm gonna go back to the bubbles, go to the production rate and change it to 0.2. Now there will be 2 less bubbles coming out. So I'm gonna change the seed too, just to switch it up. Alright, next thing you could do is, if you look closely, you can see that the bubbles, when they come out, they're on top of the gun. So what you can do is duplicate the main footage, go to the beginning of where the bubbles are coming out, click G on the keyboard for the pen tool, mask around front, you click M, mask path, right click on it, you can go track mask and track forwards. Alright, now if we close that, I'm going to just name that roto, minimize it. You can see that the bubbles are coming out behind it, and you can add a quick feather. I like 2 pixels. Here we have the bubbles coming. Alright, go back to bubbles, minimize the foam. We're going to drop a bulge. What the bulge does is it distorts whatever is in it. What we can do the same thing where we go to tip tracker, click P, so that's open. Back to bubbles, bulge center is, press Alt. Grab the pit wick and go to the position and drop it. Then click somewhere else. Now, if you click bulge, you can see that it's following the position of where it is. Excellent. We increase the radius a bit. I like to keep these under 100 because go any higher then it's way too wide of a radius. We're going to change the taper radius as well. Then we want it to bulge back in, so we're going to go negative. You don't want to go any lower than negative 3. Then you start seeing some weird stuff. Bring it to like, if you increase the taper, kind of flows it in a little bit better. So now you can see that the bubbles are, I'm actually going to increase the horizontal bit. Alright, with a little bit of fooling around, I was able to make it look a little bit better. I adjust the taper radius quite a bit and the height of the two. See that the bubbles shoot out and it's almost like they're trying to get sucked back into it. And to fix this a little bit better, I found if you go to bubbles and you click UU, or double click Y, or U, sorry. And if you go to the first one, we're under foam, where the position is, click subtract 20 and exit out of it. It'll move it closer. So now that distortion is happening a little bit closer to inside the gun and not outside. So there we go, we have the bubbles. One. The next little effect I'm going to add is twirl. This part is personal preference. I find it adds just a little bit cool variation to it. I'm going to change the twirl radius. And what this does is it kind of twirls it. So if we move where it's twirling, down, across. I find if you move it on top of the gun, that's usually when it works the best. What we'll have now is the bubbles will shoot out and then curl up. To fix this, where the bubbles come up, you can do a few things. You can go up and change the seed, which is usually the easiest. And there are seeds that don't have it, or you can change the radius of the bulge and vice versa and just change some things. Alright, change that. Swirl. Nice. Alright, now I'm going to actually color create the bubbles. So what I'm going to do is just add a tint. And you can keep it on this if you like. It's this point, it's all personal preference how you want to composite it to your footage. You can drop this down to say 80, so it has a bit of the colors from the first one. It's not as saturated as if you didn't have the tint. The other thing you can do is have the tint to 100%, so it's black and white, and then you can add a colorama. Go to output cycle, blend it with original a little bit. Have that, and then you can change this or even customize it so you have a few different colors that you like. But what I'm gonna do is get rid of that and just change it to 80, so you have a few of the colors so it looks like bubbles but it's not as saturated. I'm gonna add a fast blur. It's just the one. Bubbles aren't as sharp as around it. And this here is a plugin. It's motion blur. I find this motion blur just runs a lot quicker than pixel motion blur, but if you don't have real smart motion blur, just add pixel motion blur and it'll be the same effect. Then the bubbles. Another little quick thing you can add is I found this water blast online where it's this a bullet hitting the water or something in the water and it just kind of sprays up. Go back to the composition, go to it, find where he pulls the trigger. I pull it right there. This, rotate it, pull it down, front, and then I lowered the opacity to like 10%. So you barely see it, but it's like almost like somebody spitting or just that initial spray coming out. Alright, and this is pretty much how the effect works. You can see that the bubbles are going up quickly. This is all by changing the viscosity, back to the bubbles, foam, viscosity, and lower that a little bit so they're not raising as much. Same with the wind, you can change that to like say 4 so that the wind isn't blowing up, but that's pretty much how this effect is done and looks pretty good. Like I said before, I'll be making the tutorial on actually how to make the gun turn into bubbles very shortly, and